This is the 2 Cents Podcast brought to you by Ask Us Why Christian Apparel. My name is Jeremy and I am your host as always. And in this podcast, I interview people that I believe have the wisdom, experience, or knowledge, or all three, of topics that I believe are important and relevant for us to understand and navigate today in this crazy world we live in. If you love this podcast, we hope that you continue to listen along with us as we drop episodes every other Thursday. If you want to get to know our community and be a part of it, you can always jump on our Instagram, which is Ask Us Why with 2 Ys. And you can also check out our shop at Ask Us Why Shop. And you can see all the different apparel options that we sell and our different accessories, our newest drops that we're coming out with, so you can stay up to date with everything that we're doing. We hope you love these episodes. And with that being said, let's jump into this. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tim, for being on this podcast.
You're welcome.
This is exciting. You're like the, I don't know how to explain it. People on campus, I'm sure you've heard, like, call you Uncle Tim, or they refer to you as that. And they used to say Brian Mueller's my dad. But like, we've always seen you and Brian Mueller as like the two guys that basically run the joint, this entire campus and all the expansion and everything. But you are Dean of Students. Mm-hmm. So what exactly does that mean? Do you oversee like everything that goes on? Like, is that really what your role is right now?
Well, my technical role or title is Vice President of Student Affairs,
okay.
Dean of Students, and Campus Pastor. So what that means is Student Affairs encompasses just about everything that is outside the classroom, and that's not varsity sports.
Oh, okay.
So there's a lot of things that Student Affairs is engaged in. I mean, I think we have somewhere near 200 people that work in Student Affairs.
Wow.
Those 200 people are represented by 10 directors. So my role as dean means that I spend a lot of time with those 10 individuals to make sure that the departments that they're running are running smoothly, and that we're strategizing well in each one of those lanes, but that we're also working together to make sure that we're not stepping on each other, that we're supporting one another when we're developing programming that's going to serve students. So the dean hat usually represents the main disciplinarian on campus.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it's that for me. If things get escalated out of student conduct and it lands on my desk, then I might deal with a difficult situation. But we have a student conduct office that handles most of those kinds of behavioral issues.
Yeah.
So I'm really not the chief disciplinarian as such. So it's funny whenever, I get acquainted with a student, if they know me as the dean, then it may tell me something about them.
Yeah.
But if they know me as Pastor Tim, then they know me
Right.
in a different way. So it kind of depends on how they may see me
Right.
in my role at GCU.
Have you had it though before where situations have escalated to where you've had to like step in and handle stuff?
Oh yeah.
Does that happen pretty often actually?
Well, no, not really. I mean, most of the behavioral issues you have on a college campus are what you would expect.
Yeah, totally.
But sometimes students will push back on what they think is maybe unjust or unfair treatment or a sanction that they don't deserve. And it's pretty rare anymore because we have pretty clear guidelines and it's pretty well defined what you need to do as a student. So if a student feels like things didn't go right in maybe the process, then I might hear from them, but it's rare. I mean, we've got a great student conduct team and
Totally.
they handle their business well.
So do you feel like you handle conflict often though within your job, or is that something where it rarely comes up because you have such a strict system set up where it really takes a lot of filtering before something even gets to you?
No, not really. Well, when you say conflict can come to me in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Sometimes it may come with a student who's in conflict with another student, or maybe with a professor, which is really not my space, but they'll see me as the chief advocate around campus.
Right.
So I'm dealing with conflict quite a bit, but it doesn't usually come from a student situation.
Yeah.
Sometimes it does. So it kind of conflict is a really wide freeway with a lot of lanes in it.
Totally.
And so that's part of what you do when you get into, different levels of leadership.
Yeah.
You'll have to be able to navigate and reconcile conflict.
Yeah.
Either with employees, with parents, with students,
Totally.
with programs. There's a lot of ways that conflict can kind of land on my desk.
Yeah. So you said that, part of your past, of what I understand, is you've been a pastor for a really long time, and then you became a campus pastor. So being a campus pastor and technically being the dean, do you ever feel like you have to flip the switch on which one you have to be to someone, or do they integrate really well? Or do you feel like sometimes people will see you as Pastor Tim and other times they're like, ooh, he's being dean of Tim right now?
Yeah, well, that does happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you have to confront a student with, some pretty hard information.
Yeah.
It's, you can't put it always in terms in which it's going to be well received. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just hard. It's difficult. You're going to have to kick them out of housing.
Yeah.
I had a funny story where I was at a local restaurant and they had valet parking. They don't have it anymore, but it was a new restaurant. So we drove there for lunch, and a student, when I got out of my car and I put my hand out to get the little receipt from him, or the little card or whatever they were going to give me, and he goes, "No, I know who you are." I said, "Oh, you're a GCU student." He says, "Well, I was, but you kicked me out of school." So I'm like, "Oh, my word."
Oh, no.
Yeah, so it was kind of funny. He jumps in my car and rips down the driveway, and I thought, oh, man, it's like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. My car's going to go all over the city for this little 1 hour lunch.
And then he's going to try and put it in reverse to take the miles off.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So that didn't happen, thankfully. But sometimes you think you're known as one person, and some others know you as, the dean.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. So I want to get like a bigger picture of who Tim Griffin is, because Tim Griffin has been so many things in the past, but I wanted to start off with NASCAR, because I know that's something you did, I believe, for 12 years is what you kind of did. But I really wanted to dive into more your experience with that and why you got into that, because I believe you went from a pastoral role, and then you left that to do that for 12 years, and then you came here to GCU. So what was that 12 years like being in NASCAR, and why did you decide to go that route?
Well, I was when I first started pastoring, I'll give you the backdrop to how I actually got there. There was a missions pastor across town from me. I was in a church plant in Southern California, and a mutual friend said, "Hey, you need to meet Max," was his name, and he might be able to help you. That church has lots of resources, and your church is just getting started, so maybe you guys need to get together.
Did you start the church that you were at too?
No, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I was working for Youth for Christ, which is a little bit like Young Life.
Okay.
And working for the college I graduated from, a small little Bible college in Southern California. And so I was plugged into this church. I was just there. Me and my wife were just attending, trying to support this effort. Mm-hmm. And then the pastor and his wife decided to leave, and so it kind of landed in my lap. And I'm like, oh, wow, I had signed up for this, but here I am, right?
Yeah.
So I was talking to this guy who was a part of a network of churches, and he was kind of like an executive pastor, older, wiser. And he said, "Hey, you need to get together with Max. They have some resources at their church that might help you." And I said, "All right, great. I need all the help I can get. I need people. I need chairs. I need music. I need whatever." So I called him. We met for lunch. He jumps in my car, and I'm driving to the restaurant. He said, "In Europe, they shave the heads on the motors on these things. They race them all over." I'm like, "Okay. Well, what does that have to do with anything?"
Yeah.
And he was just all about racing in cars. Huh. And I wasn't. I didn't grow up as a race kind of guy.
Right.
And so we got to lunch, and I started putting the ask on him. I need this, I need that, I need this. I'm a struggling young pastor. I don't know what I'm doing. He goes, yeah, we'll help you with all that stuff. He said, but I'm getting ready to leave the church. I'm like, oh, shoot. This is my connection to resources.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what are you going to do? He says, I'm moving to Daytona. I'm going to start a ministry to NASCAR.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, oh, okay. Then I just thought, well, I bought lunch, and this is going to go nowhere. Because I don't care about NASCAR. I don't care about racing. I don't care about any of that. And so I went back to my church. He ended up moving to Daytona a few months later, and the church did help us, but that connection point was gone. Well, Max, for the next 12 years, every time he was in Southern California visiting donors or friends, because he had been in pastoral ministry out in that part of the country, he would call me. He said, "Hey, where are you at? Let's have lunch. Let's have coffee." And he said, "You ready to come to the racetrack with me?" I said, "No, Max. I don't know anything about racing. I don't care about it." He said, "It's a great ministry. You'll be perfect for it." I said, "All right, thanks." For 12 years.
Oh, wow.
And so in that 12-year span of time, I had ended up at 3 different churches. And every year, he'd either speak for me if he was there during the middle of the week. He'd come to a Bible study with me and tell me stories, or tell the group of, this home Bible study about what happened at the track last weekend.
Yeah.
And he had these incredible stories of how God would use him or others in the industry to do ministry, to do kingdom work there. And I was fascinated by it. It's like, this is a crazy ministry.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really understand what it meant to be in the industry of motorsports. But here was Max. I mean, he was, driving through town and telling these incredible stories, and he'd share them, from the pulpit if he spoke for me at church. So after my third church, we're sitting in the auditorium, and he's sitting on the front bench with me, and he said, "You ready to come to work for me?" And I said, "I don't know. Maybe. I'm interested. I mean, after all these years, I'm really interested in what you're doing, and maybe God's moving me along." So he started getting me plugged in to a bunch of motorcycle racers in Southern California. I had no idea where to start.
Yeah.
All I knew is that Max had a ton of stories. And so he started getting me involved in motorcycle racing and boat racing and stock car racing, NASCAR racing, and just taking me to the track. And I would just kind of hang on his belt loop, and he'd make his way through the garage or the motor coach compound or wherever he was doing ministry, and I would just hang out with him. I'm like, this is incredible. I've never seen ministry happen quite like he's doing ministry. So I was really captivated by the style that you got to minister in those settings. So I was at my third church for 3 years, and during that third year is when he started getting me plugged in to things. I ended up doing some funerals on some racers who died, as from
accidents like within the so within racing,
at the track, or they were close to the sport and they just didn't have a pastor, and so when someone did pass away, they would call on me, and I became kind of this surrogate chaplain to people in motorsports in Southern California. And I really didn't know what was going on in the industry, but I was kind of starting to step into it a little bit. Then after I decided, it's probably time for me to leave this church, I was pretty much into the motorcycle race community. I was leading a Bible study with a bunch of guys. I was also doing it with boat racers. And but I was really finding traction in motorcycle racing. And that's really where I got started. And I had no idea who was in the room in these Bible studies, but they were factory riders, which was the highest level of contract you could get as a racer if you signed a contract with a factory like Suzuki or Honda or Yamaha or whatever. And so those were the guys in this Bible study. And I didn't know how influential they were. They were just guys trying to figure out how to follow Jesus. Some of them were, dating and getting engaged and getting married. And so they were at all these these stages of a young athlete, a young celebrity. And I didn't really understand their world. And so when I resigned my church, I jumped into motorcycle stuff. That's really where I started. And it was because all the factories were in Southern California. Yamaha, Suzuki, Honda, Kawasaki, all of them were based there. And so a lot of the racers, the professional racers that did it full time, lived in that area, practiced in that area, signed their contracts, did all their sponsored deals there. And some of the biggest races on the series, or in the series, were in Anaheim. So these were supercross, motocross guys. So supercross would run in the spring, and during the summer would be the outdoor motocross series. So they had a chaplain, but I was leading a Bible study. He lived in North Carolina, and I lived in Southern California. So we kind of tag teamed together. Yeah. And I kind of cut my teeth on, all right, this is what it means to do ministry within a professional sport. Yeah. And it just happened to be motorsports. Which I really didn't know anything about, which honestly really served me well because I wasn't gaga about these guys. Like, wow, you're so-and-so. That never I never had that because I didn't follow the sport. I didn't know who was who. And so for those guys, because they're just surrounded by people, they're fans and, they're hangers on, all that comes with being a celebrity athlete in your particular sport, you got to deal with. And here I am walking into them. I'm trying to do ministry stuff, and I really don't care that you're a star and you got helmets and boots named after you or whatever. I just wasn't super impressed. I mean, I was a stick and ball sport guy, so that's the kind of stuff I followed. For those guys, they knew I didn't know what I was talking about when I started talking about racing. And I would tell them, I said, listen, I don't know what I'm talking about here. I don't know what I'm looking at. It's got two wheels. It looks like a motorcycle.
Have you seen the TV show Ted Lasso? Or have you heard of it?
I absolutely have heard of it.
Okay, so this kind of sounds similar because Ted Lasso was an American college football coach who moved to England or to Europe to coach soccer. And he had no idea the rules or anything about it, but like had the spirit that no one else had. And there was that influence that like changes the team.
Wow.
So I think you'd really like the show because you'd probably relate to it a lot.
I probably would.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times people have recommended me to watch that show. And I actually signed up for Apple TV and it wouldn't play on my television.
No way.
So I'm pretty lame.
Well, this is the reminder to try again because you'll love it.
So anyway, that's how I jumped in. So it started with motorcycles, and I was doing it regionally because they raced a lot in the Southwest. Mm-hmm. And then when NASCAR would come to town, I would go out to Fontana. That's where they raced in Southern California, still do. And in Northern California, they raced at Sears Point, which is now called Infineon, I think. It was a road course. And so I was kind of getting an introduction to stock car racing. Mm-hmm. And so I did motorcycles for the first 6 years that I was there.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Pretty much full time. And then I transitioned to doing stock cars about halfway through my 12 years out there, and did the NASCAR circuit for the last half of my career. Wow. In motorsports ministry.
That's a lot.
It was great fun.
Yeah. So what's the culture like in NASCAR compared to what you had experienced prior? Because I mean, once you're a pastor of a church, obviously the culture is a lot different. It depends on obviously how much ministry you're doing outside of that, but for the most part, it's going to be pretty different. So what was the culture like for you? And when you first came in, was it like a culture shock, or like were you the black sheep of the bunch there, or what was it like for you for the culture?
Well, one, it's an entertainment business.
Yeah.
And these guys are athletes, believe it or not. I mean, to drive those cars like they do, I mean, you got to be in shape.
They wear the same suits that astronauts wear, right? Because they have to put up with the heat inside of some of these cars.
Well, it probably has the same technology
that's
incorporated in their race suits that you would have on airplanes or jets, or I don't know about, space vehicles, but I wouldn't be surprised. Pretty sophisticated stuff. And that's what I didn't know. I didn't realize how sophisticated the business is.
Right. You're like, it's another left turn, another left. You're like, that's it.
Right. And that's what everybody thinks until you take a ride with a driver and you realize, oh my word, they're crazy.
That sounds fun.
It was fun, but it is, it's at a different level. So I didn't, NASCAR as a community, as a culture, the people that traveled on the road when I was out there. So it's been a few years since I was out there, and the sport is changing every year. Mm-hmm. But when I was out there, the level of sophistication that went into putting on a weekly show with thousands of participants and hundreds of thousands of guests at the track and millions watching by TV, and doing that every weekend, a setup and tear down every weekend. It was, wow. Oh, it's amazing. It's an unbelievable operation. So the community is very tight, and you have got to know your business in order to pull off an event like that every single weekend. So it's an incredibly serious machine that moves into a track and does all the setup, whether it's the production TV side of things, whether it's the marketing side of things, the actual race cars and the race teams, everything that goes into it takes an enormous amount of coordination. And so they work together, for the most part, really well. Yeah. And I was just amazed on how the whole operation worked. And it was, it was exciting.
Yeah.
Really, if you've ever been to a race, it's loud, it's big, there's lots of spectacle to it.
Totally.
And so, when the bug bites, you go to a track and you see all of this happening, it's like, wow, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
And it was so it was fun, those first few races, and then I started realizing that this is a real community. I mean, they live together, they travel together, they work together, they compete against each other. So there may be 3,000 or 4,000 within the industry that would travel to the track. There's thousands more back home, building cars, taking care of the race shop at home. But those on the road, there were 3,000 or 4,000 people. So it was like a little town that moved every week,
like a carnival almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Interesting.
So, you realize that if you're in it, you better know what you're doing and don't get in the way, because they've got to hit their marks all the time.
Yeah.
And so you learn where to stand, where not to stand, when to talk, when not to talk, because they got to take care of business. And so there was it was for me, I needed to go in there and just watch and look and listen and learn.
Yeah.
Or I would be in the wrong place at the wrong time and not be helpful to anybody. And it took me a long time to figure those things out. At the same time, you've got people that everybody wants to be close to.
Yeah.
At least in that sport. And so it takes them a long time to trust.
Totally.
And understandably. Yeah. Because everybody's after them for something.
Right.
And so you've got to earn that. And they call it, in racing, they call it seat time.
Seat time.
Before you start pulling moves on the track, you need to be in the car, rolling around for a while. You need to put in your seat time.
Yeah.
So I needed my seat time to walk around the track, walk around the garage, just be around and put in the week after week after week grind like they did.
Totally.
And until they would kind of accept you in.
How long did that take?
It took me almost 2 years.
Wow. And
I was doing a chapel every Sunday, and they would graciously come to chapel and nod their head and say thank you, and they would wave and shake my hand, but I never felt like I was in for that first 2 years.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I can take you to the spot in Daytona where all of a sudden it was like this veil of invisibility had been lifted from me, where I was like, somehow now I feel like I'm in. Yeah. Like I'm a member of their community now. Yeah. 2 years of walking around a track, scratching your head going, what in the world am I doing here? Yeah. Am I doing anything that God would be honored by? I'm trying to stay out of the way most of the time, trying to figure out how to have a brief conversation somewhere that's going to be meaningful. And it just was so hard. Yeah. But they were watching. Yeah. They saw me walking around the garage all the time. Yep. And then that one particular year, it was like, all right, everybody shook my hand. Hey, good to see you. Call me by name. I'm like, holy cow, I didn't even know he knew who I was. And it was the strangest thing. And I realized, it took me 2 years of my seat time to kind of be welcomed into the community.
Wow. So that was a commitment for sure. Oh, but did you feel like you weren't welcome all the way up until that point that you experienced? Or is it just like you knew that like you were slowly earning trust and it was a little process?
Well, you kind of wrestle with yourself, right? Especially those of us in ministry, you want to be able to serve and see impact and see a change of life, and it's just longer and slower in that space. So I didn't feel like I wasn't welcomed, but I did feel like I was an outsider. Yeah. Not only was I from Southern California, I wasn't from the South, I wasn't from racing, and I probably stood out more than I realized. Yeah. But I was trying to blend in, trying to be a wallflower, just be around in case something happened, that I could serve a driver or a crew member or a marketing person or whatever. Yeah. And it just takes a while to be in that right place at the right time, to where all of a sudden the door opens and you get to be a part of somebody's life.
Well, I find it really fascinating because a lot of people will commit to something new and they'll be in a completely new environment, a new place, and they have no idea what they're doing, which sounds like what you started with. And that's the definition of discomfort, of being outside of your comfort zone and doing something different. So for you in that process, like, did you struggle with doubts and with backing out a lot of it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I always felt insecure about my knowledge of racing. It's like, do I really need to be an expert on what it means to turn down into a corner or stay in a groove? Yeah. All the stuff you learn after being out there for a while. I didn't know any of that. I'm like, do I have to talk about this stuff to get along with these guys? Right. And it was just, so I always felt insecure about being there. It's like, there's somebody that should be doing this job, not me. Yeah. But God, why am I here? I mean, I don't know how to talk to them. I don't know how to, be a part of their lives because they've got these very unique lives. And mine's pretty traditional, but so I had to fight against that a lot.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, there were a couple things about it that made it easy and hard at the same time. Southern hospitality is a thing.
Yeah.
It's a real thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, they would call you over to their motor coach and, have a glass of iced tea and sit down and chat. But I always felt like I was a visitor.
Yeah.
Even though they were kind and they'd nod and they'd tip their hat to me and, give me a little bit of chaplain's respect that I hadn't really earned. I would, but they felt like I deserved it. But I always felt internally like, I don't belong here. This isn't my place. Until I turned that corner and all of a sudden I felt like I kind of belonged.
Yeah.
Where people would call me, people would invite me in, the conversations would go to a different level.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, I finally got here. And it took a long time to get there. And even having motorcycles in my background and boat racing and some vintage racing stuff that I kind of, messed around with in terms of ministry stuff, that really didn't qualify me for, the NASCAR world because it was such a unique space. But at least it gave me a sense of background to where I kind of understood a little bit more of what I was getting into. It was hard to kind of cross the bridge with them.
So what kept you in it?
I think there were a lot of things. It's made up of a lot of really good people, really good families. And, we have these views of these sports icons that we think are, larger than life. And they're just people. Yeah. Once you go fishing with them or play golf or have a meal or sit next to their motor coach or sit in their motor coach and you're talking to them and all of a sudden you realize this is just a regular dude. Yeah. He happens to know how to do this better than others, but he's just like me. He's scared. He's nervous. He feels insecure. Yeah. He has relationships that, aren't always going well. He has bad experiences in life. So, once you get a view of that, all of a sudden it's like, wow, they have needs just like I have needs. Right. And everybody else has needs. But to get to them's harder because they're working every Sunday. Right. And they have a weird life where people think things about them that may not be fair and they can't have their privacy like we can. Right. So church is really hard for them. Just even going and sitting in a pew and everybody's pointing and looking, because if so-and-so shows up, it's like, oh, there he is. Yeah. And that's just hard. It is. Living with that all the time. So then it was like, well, if we're not out here, who else is going to do this for them? Who's going to put up with this grind week in and week out, getting on airplanes, flying to the track, checking in a motorhome or checking into a hotel, driving in traffic, wading through whatever if it rained, and it's a pain after a while. It looks fun if you go 1 week in a year to watch a big race happen, right? But if you're working in it, it's a grind of a lifestyle, and so you have to really decide: am I willing to jump into this and just be a part of it? Because it's going to take a lot of a person to be in it. Because they had nobody really like us out there to do that kind of ministry, it really felt like a really important strategic ministry for a group of people that are really out of the reach of most churches.
Wow. Do you feel like identity is something that you had to work a lot with them on because of how everyone around them, surrounding them, is like enforcing and encouraging and like reaffirming that because they're such an amazing driver and they have this skill set that like that's who they are. And then if something goes wrong, like they crash in the middle or they lose in a race or their, reputation gets somewhat, messed with, a publicity, email or something goes out there that starts to kind of ruin their reputation. Do you feel like you had to, like, you witnessed that a lot? Because I know in the sports industry, just in general, even with high schoolers and college students, the second they get an injury, they have an identity crisis because they were like, this is all I knew. This is all I ever did. And now I'm at a point where I can't do that thing anymore. And I don't know what to do with my life. Did you ever witness stuff like that within NASCAR as well? Or do you feel like they were pretty solid with, no, like, I'm a driver. And like anyone else, I just understand that. Did you ever kind of witness that a lot?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, after the Monday after the last race weekend was always called Black Mondays, kind of like in other sports.
Yeah.
Once the big game is played, who's going to get fired the following week?
Oh, wow.
And so
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah. At the last race of the year used to be in Homestead, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So Black Monday would follow that Sunday where the championship trophy would be hoisted on stage.
Yeah.
And people, by way of TV, millions of people would watch in and celebrate with that driver who won the championship. But on Monday, I knew a lot of guys were going to get their pink slips. They were done.
Wow.
Whether they were a crew member in marketing, sometimes an ownership would just take place and they would just shuffle the deck to kind of change things up. And it's professional sports, which is really, really hard.
It's cutthroat.
It is cutthroat, and it's a difficult lifestyle. And so as a result, if you're around the sport, you're just going to see that.
Yeah.
You're going to see it a lot. Mm-hmm. Different times of the year, kind of ebbs and flows. And so those that were in front of the camera or the microphone, they had to come to terms with who they were.
Yeah.
And some of them, they had a lot of their identity tied to being that professional race car driver or motorcycle racer, rider. Mm-hmm. And they had to wrestle with that. So it's not easy to do that, especially when everybody's telling you they're the greatest thing ever and you're going to be, this world champion or national champion or whatever, and you start believing your press, and then they tell you how great you are, and you start believing that. So you could see those that had their feet on the ground and could hear people say things about them, and those that said, yeah, but I know how I really am. They wouldn't say it that way, but you could tell there were those that was like, thank you, I appreciate that. And they didn't let it get to them.
Yeah.
But that's not true for all of them. Some of them start believing, I probably am all that in a bag of chips. They're right. I am that great guy.
Yeah.
And those were the ones that I think fell as hard as anybody.
Yeah.
They got too tied to that public persona. Mm-hmm. And then when it's gone, it's like, yeah, who am I? What do I do now?
Totally.
So, it's the nature of sports. It's the nature of celebrity and entertainment and cameras and media. Mm-hmm. It's that edge of the sword that cuts, and it can cut really deeply.
Yeah.
And so, I ended up seeing that a lot.
Our mission statement here at Ask Us Why is pretty simple. It's that we believe passionately in supporting, mobilizing, and discipling believers to carry out the gospel wherever they go. And I'm super passionate about just teaching Jesus and bringing him to the world and helping you grow in your faith. But even more than that, I'm also really passionate about apparel. It sounds strange, and I wasn't really the type to do that. If anything, I'm someone that doesn't really wear any kind of designs. I mean, even the shirt I'm wearing right now does not have any designs. And for a long time, I didn't go anywhere outside of that. That was my thing. I just was kind of held off to that. And maybe you're someone that's like, I don't really wear Christian apparel. I'm not really into that. And maybe it's cringy for you, or maybe it's just not your style. But what changed my mind about it is that when you wear something as simple as a phrase that says, ask me about Jesus, or Jesus is king, or let me tell you a story, whatever the design is, that it creates opportunities and like circumstances that would rather either not happen if you didn't wear a shirt like that when you're in public. I mean, I've had conversations with people about my shirts that I wear. I've had people that have, just complimented it. It's really cool, but it opens up opportunities for new relationships with other believers if you didn't know that they were a believer before. It also opens opportunities for those that are non-believers that want to know more about Jesus and a relationship with him. And we know that we are all called to share the gospel, and it can be scary, but that's why here at Ask Us Why, we're so passionate about trying to support and disciple you to do that. And so we create videos that are called Design Inspiration that go through each design that we've created, sharing along the message that we hope to intend to share, that we want to support and mobilize you to do the same. And so we'll share those videos with you guys, but we'll also post about it. And so our hopes is that you're being equipped properly to go out and to share the gospel. And you don't have to know everything. You don't have to be someone that's this guru. What really matters is that you just have a heart for sharing Jesus. And we want to do that and create more opportunities for you to do that. And apparel is a great way to do that. So if you love Ask Us Why and what we do, going to our shop and buying something from there is one of the best ways that you can continue to support us, alongside either following us on social media or sharing the content that we create with your followers or friends and family. So if you want to support us in some way, that is one of the best ways that you can do that. And it would mean the world to us as we continue to grow this community and focus on building the kingdom for Jesus. With that being said, we'll jump right back into the episode. So did you ever have people that you were really investing into and like building a relationship with, and like you were making progress, and then they got the pink slip and they were out and you just didn't get to see them anymore? Like, did that happen?
Absolutely.
A lot, or
Absolutely.
just sometimes? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was there during a time when there were a lot of racers who had long careers and great careers. And so when I was there, they were either in the middle of it or towards the end of it, and they were starting to transition, thinking about the next stage in life. And those guys had been there through some really grueling years of building the sport. And so when they were in it, I mean, they were really critical to the success of the sport because they were part of the underpinnings that made it popular and loved, by the fans. And then when they started thinking, you know what, I probably got another 2 years, 5 years, I think I'm going to check out. And they started getting on that train. What do I have to do next to get ready for my life after racing?
Yeah.
And so that happened probably towards the end of my time out there. And there's still a few guys that are still racing that were there when I was there, but not very many.
Right.
Now it's a whole new crew of drivers that are out there. And it's hard. I'm not sure, how the sport's doing now. I don't know what the community's like. I haven't been out there like I was. But just looking at it from, where everybody else looks at it from, the sidelines, the grandstands are on TV, you just go, man, I wonder how it's going now, because that young guy doesn't have a wife to go home to, maybe a girlfriend, maybe a dog. And some of the older guys have wives and kids and dogs. And, so it kind of settles you, when you're off camera, you kind of can be a real person. Whereas if that's all your life is and you're young and you're hearing all these people say these great things about you, it can jack you up.
Yeah.
And so I sometimes worry about these turnover years when you get all these new guys coming into it. It's really hard.
Yeah. Do you stay somewhat connected with that like world still a little bit? Do you keep in connection with those guys?
A few from time to time. I think out of pastoral respect, whenever I left as a chaplain, it really needed to be handed over to the next guy.
Right.
And had I been out there too much, it would have been easy for guys to default back to the relationship that I had with them. And so I wasn't real close for probably the first 3 or 4 or 5 years after I left. And they had a new guy that was from the sport, and I was absolutely perfect for being their chaplain. I mean, he was a jack man. He was on a crew. He came to Christ while he was out in the world of racing. And then he went to college and seminary, got all his stuff in line, his education, and he's been out there now for about 10 years. He's just a phenomenal chaplain. He's one of them.
Yeah.
I was an outsider. He was one of them.
Wow.
So I do go out to the track at least once a year, sometimes both races here in Phoenix. But I'm just there's still guys out there that know me.
Totally.
That will see me and like, hey, where you been?
Yeah, totally.
And that makes it fun. So I'll connect with them. But every year I go out there, there's fewer and fewer.
Wow.
Because it's a young man's game. I mean, it's not easy to live that lifestyle, being on a plane every week.
Yeah. And so
multiple times.
Did you travel with them as well then too? Or I can't remember if you said you stayed stationary in Southern California.
Yeah, when I started, I was in Southern Cal, and then I moved to Tucson.
Okay.
Before coming to Phoenix to work at Grand Canyon. But I was flying out of Tucson to the tracks wherever they were.
Yeah.
Our ministry organization was based in Concord, which is where Lowe's Motor Speedway is, right in the heart of where most of the drivers live and the race shops are based. And so I would meet our team at the track. So they would drive motorhomes and different kinds of vehicles that we might take to the track to do ministry. And I would just fly in from Arizona.
Okay. And at this time you were married, had a family?
Yes.
Did you had kids at this point too?
2 boys.
So you traveled a lot while managing a family.
Yeah.
Was that really hard for you?
It was. Yeah. I was like a lot of pastors, you work 24/7 in your brain.
Yeah.
You never, I don't know what the word Sabbath, I know what the word Sabbath means. Yeah. My life does not know what Sabbath means.
Yeah.
And to know that good rhythm, I mean, it was hard as a local church pastor, and it was really hard as a chaplain in motorsports going all over the country doing this stuff. So trying to be good at it and trying to be focused on it, you had to give yourself to it.
Right.
Thankfully, the organization that I worked for was really sensitive to me being home, making sure I took care of my marriage, took care of my kids, and I was, I was fortunate in that the rhythm of my life was just opposite enough my kids' life that I could be at most of their athletic events and their things during the week at school because I was home and I was gone on weekends when they were out with their friends. So it kind of worked, but I was still gone a lot.
Yeah.
But my kids have never said to me, that they held it over me, that I wasn't there.
Yeah.
Things, I don't know what I missed. And they've never made me feel like, I missed things. I just know I did. Sometimes it's just time. It's just being there.
Right.
You don't have to always be something special going on. Just being in the room is half of it sometimes.
Yeah.
So I did miss some of that.
Totally. Do you hate traveling now?
I do.
You do.
I'm glad you asked that. I'm my wife. Whenever we travel, I can pack in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's
I'm sure you became really good at it.
Yeah, it makes her crazy. It takes her 2 days, right? She's got, am I going to wear that? Will I use that? And I'm like, come on, I'll warm up the car, then I'll pack and we'll go. So one day we were getting on a flight, just the two of us, and having traveled all those years and had status because I was on a plane all the time, I just got really spoiled traveling.
Yeah.
And so I was so irritable to get on a plane and sit in coach, when people got,
what is this? I'm sitting with peasants.
Yes. It's embarrassing to say it, but it was just the truth. And so she looked at me one day and I was huffing and puffing probably about some other passenger. And she goes, "You're a travel snob." I said, "Yeah, I guess I am, aren't I?" And it kind of put me in my place. I'm like, dang, I gotta straighten up here a little bit. Somebody might ask me about my faith somewhere. It's like, yeah, but you're a jerk getting on the plane.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I hate traveling. I will drive for hours before I get on a plane. I just hate the whole routine anymore.
Yeah. So it's just road trips now.
Yeah.
That's the normal method.
It is. It's the preferred method. Sometimes I will fly, but I'd rather be in a car just driving.
So if you can, will you fly first class?
No. I've already used all those miles up.
Okay.
That's over. No, I haven't done that since I had status. Those automatic upgrades, they know how to keep you flying.
Yeah.
Those things were gold. But you get on the plane first, they give you a little drink, you sit in this big old wide seat. Oh, it was, if you have to travel all the time, it makes sense. But no, we're sitting in coach. We're in the cattle cars on Southwest like everybody else.
That's awesome. So speaking of travel, you guys traveled to Tucson and then you eventually moved on to GCU. So why leave NASCAR and move to GCU?
Man, that is such a great question. It's funny, when God starts working in your heart, you don't always realize it.
Yeah.
The 12 years I was out in the world of motorsports, I started learning things about it. One was it's a very difficult world to be in and to get in and to stay in.
Right.
And so I kind of felt like, man, now that I'm here, it's like I felt obligated. Like I got to be here. I got to fly all the time to be a part of this ministry endeavor. And it was funny, the year I left, which was the 2010 season, early in that race year, we were meeting outside of Bristol Motor Speedway, and the president of the organization, and I was I was kind of the face because I was a chaplain. He had kind of gone around the room to our ministry team and said, "All right, I want everybody to kind of give me a sense of your commitment to our future."
Yeah.
And I remember all of us, thumbs up. We're here for the long haul, and little did I know, 4 or 5 months later, I would be turning in my resignation.
Wow.
Because I really felt like, man, it took me a long time to kind of get positioned here in order to have the kind of ministry opportunity that I did, that I shouldn't just pick up and leave.
Right.
And so but I was torn because I was still a husband, I was still a dad. Mm-hmm. And it's like, man, I'm tired of this whole routine of traveling, but I felt obligated to the opportunity and all that the organization had invested in me to be there to do this, and the community accepting me in. It's like, I got to be here.
Right.
So when that question was asked in that cabin that we met, I said, "Yeah, dude, I'm in. I'm not going anywhere." And then the grind of the season, And I'm like, man, I've been doing this for a long time. I'm tired. I miss my wife. I miss my kids. I miss just being home, eating cereal out of my bowls, just stupid stuff. And GCU at the time, I didn't know a whole lot about it other than my oldest son was a student athlete here. My younger son played the same sport, and so we expected him to come here and play.
What sport?
Volleyball.
Okay.
Indoor volleyball.
Let's go.
So it was the only varsity program in Arizona, and it was a brand new program, and so he was scholarship to come here and play. And so
and when you were, and at that time too, like campus wasn't this.
Oh,
it was. I remember I have a brother that's 10 years older than me, and I remember he said he looked at going to GCU way back when, and he was like, there was like 5 buildings.
Oh yeah.
So that's probably what you witnessed too, right?
Absolutely. Actually, I've kind of got an adopted niece that considered coming here. So her and her mom came up here and came out to Arizona, and she said, hey, Uncle Tim, will you drive us by Grand Canyon University? I'm like, well, yeah, I've never been there, but I'll drive on campus. So I drove up from Tucson. We drove on campus. I thought, holy cow, surely she's not going to go here. We didn't even get out of the car. And I said, hey, you want to get out and walk around? She goes, no, Uncle Tim, I think I'm good. Literally, we drove through what was campus then, and we drove off and went back to Tucson. It was kind of like, well, it's kind of a wasted trip.
Yeah.
Because they were flying from the Midwest. So my son was talking about coming here. I thought, holy moly, this is not good.
Was the price what it was worth at this point of what it looked like? Like, was it more expensive than what it should have been, or did it look like what it cost?
Expense-wise, that's a hard question to answer, because I think Taylor, my oldest son, was he loved his sport, and this was the only varsity program in the state, and that was number one for him. And I thought, well, he hasn't figured out what he wants to do with himself.
Totally.
So if this is where where he can play his sport at the collegiate level, so be it.
Yeah.
We'll figure out all the other details. And so he really got our heads turned towards GCU. So the student loans, the scholarships that he got, everything that we had to put together to make him a student athlete here, was like, that was worth it. We were going to do it, whatever. And so he played, his first year, and we were watching from afar. We live, a couple hours away, and so we'd get up to matches whenever he played home. But I was traveling for Nascar, and so when he was out on the road, I would just take a different flight to wherever he was playing on the road, and I would be like the only fan from GCU that would show up.
You had the purple paint on the face too, right?
It wasn't quite that bad.
You started the habits.
So, but for me, it was like I had all these miles. I just burned these miles catching a leg to some, university where they were playing a match.
What a blessing.
Oh, it was huge.
Wow.
So I followed them to Hawaii, to the Midwest, to Florida. I took the whole team out to Daytona and gave them a tour of Daytona. So stuff like that they wouldn't have had an opportunity to do had it not, kind of been a tag along.
Totally.
So it was great fun. But that's, going back to your original question, I think for me, I was getting a little weary of the road, and I felt like God was changing my heart about what he wanted me to do. And my kids were getting older, and I thought, man, if I don't figure out how to get off the road, they're gonna be graduated college, married, and gone before I blink twice. So, and I had not thought about that until that in 2010, the dean of students at the time had asked me on 2 different years prior to speak in chapel. Those chapels went well because I had these goofy racing stories that nobody knew.
Right.
So they weren't like recooked by somebody else. It's like these very unique racing related stories. So they were kind of hits in chapel.
Yeah.
And so I think the administration had this false sense that, hey, Tim may be great here. Just because these stories probably hit in chapel, it's like, well, I don't know if I can do this job.
Yeah.
And so they asked me in like March if I'd be interested. I said, nah, thanks, but no thanks. I'm good where I'm at.
And so were you in Tucson at this point or no?
Yeah, we were in Tucson.
You were in Tucson, okay.
Yeah, I was just flying all over the country. And so we were up here for a volleyball match, and I got approached up in the bleachers. Hey, would you be interested in this campus pastor job? I said, nah, thanks, no thanks. And probably 2 months later, they circled back and said, we had a couple misfires that didn't work out for us. Would you reconsider? And I thought, wow. I said, well, send me the job description. And so they emailed it to me, and I showed my wife. She looked at it. She goes, wow, this sounds like you. And I thought, oh, shoot. Now I got to think about this.
Yeah.
And so the more we thought about it and started weighing the pros and cons of staying with the NASCAR job or taking this new job, it really made sense for me to take it. And I really thought I'd be here for a couple of years.
Yeah.
You know, my oldest son, if my younger son came here and played well, I'd weather his volleyball career, and then we'd be done in 4 years. Mm-hmm. Well, that's now 12 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, when I had those thoughts. So it was a transition that we really weren't ready for. We had no idea what it was going to lead to, nor did we know that GCU would become what GCU is today. So I just feel really, really fortunate.
Yeah. So when you first took the job, from what I remember, from what I've read, is you lived on campus. So you moved from Tucson and came and lived here. What was that like?
It was really, using fishing terminology, it's what really sank the hook for me. Strangely enough. So we had our house in Tucson, 2 hours away. Mm-hmm. Our youngest was still in high school. So my wife said, listen, I got to make sure, our youngest is going back and forth to classes and the house is doing all right and he's being taken care of. So I was up on campus. So she'd drive up and stay with me for a few days. She'd go home. Then I'd go back down on weekends if I was, just back and forth. So we had these two locations. So I thought it didn't make any sense for me to buy a house up here, at least initially, until we figured out if this was going to work, if I was going to do well enough at the job to stay. And so we didn't buy a house probably for the first 2 years. And they gave us an apartment on campus because we had plenty of apartments on campus that didn't have students in them. So here I am, this old dude with a pair of flip-flops and shorts and a T-shirt walking to the laundromat to do laundry.
That's awesome.
And seeing students there, they're looking at me like, what are you doing here? Who are you?
You come back to finally finish your degree?
Something like that. So it was kind of fun. And then my wife would come up and she thought it was the best because she would get to meet all these young girls on campus and have great conversations with them. So for us, it was like, wow, what a neat opportunity. Yeah. And to live on campus amongst the students when they were in class, when they were out of class, when they're just wandering around campus as it was then, riding their bikes and whatever was happening on campus, we just would roll out of our apartment, walk down to the gym or walk down to wherever something was happening. And it's what kind of introduced us to being involved with student ministry, which I had never done before. I'd never been in student ministry. Yeah. So I didn't know what I was doing.
Right. And so you're back to square one. You had just done 12 years of like nailing it down, NASCAR ministry. You knew what to do. You're just back to square one again.
Absolutely. I mean, I felt like a freshman just graduated, or like a senior just graduated in college going, oh my goodness, now I'm out in the professional world. I was here like, I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah. And there were some great staff members that really took me under their wing and encouraged me and supported me and watched out for me, all the things that I needed when I was learning how to be involved with student ministry when I first got here. So it was God just divinely orchestrated some things in my life with where I was leaving to what I was coming to. Yeah. And I mean, nobody could have put all those pieces together like he did. Totally. That made it such a great introduction to being involved with college students. So I did that for 2 years. We lived in NRA and just watched how student life started.
They haven't changed since then, right? They're still the same. They're still designs.
Same.
Do you ever walk by and just get hit with nostalgia?
Totally. Yeah. Anytime I walk through where the laundromat is in the middle. Yep. And I walk through there, it's like, wow, it doesn't seem like it's 12 years ago, but that's a long time ago.
Wow. Yeah.
Those were great days for me to be introduced to GCU. And then, President Mueller had this vision of growth. Yeah. And he was a business guy. He was very driven, and it was like a lot of guys that I was working with in the motorsports world. You don't survive in that world unless you're very driven and you're committed to your craft. And Brian was uniquely like that. He was not like what you would assume to be a traditional academic or president, university president. He was just very different. I thought, man, this guy's a lot like the people I've just been around for the last decade or so. And so it was very easy for me to fall into a pace that he was on. And then, once he turned his focus to the ground campus, and really part of the pitch for me that he gave me was, I want to turn my attention to the ground campus and start building community and buildings and just build a very robust campus experience. We've already got the online thing kind of going, but I want to turn my attention to the ground campus. So for me, it was like, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing, but we'll figure out how to build community, because I've been around community building my whole life.
Totally.
So we'll figure it out here. And he gave me, enough rope to get out there and learn some things.
So GCU, I didn't know that, but so GCU was really just online when it first started.
No, it had a ground campus, just very few students.
Right, but it was like primarily known for being like an online school, and then in that transition, it was more focused now to ground
Right.
for everything else. So, I mean, what was the student count do you know what the student count was when you first moved on campus?
I think when I got here in 2010, it was a couple thousand.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how many actually lived on campus.
Right.
Probably somewhere like 1,000 to 1,500 were living on campus. Probably 1,000 to 2,000 were commuting.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, just a handful of students.
Yeah. I mean, my high school had, I think, 1,700 students. So, I mean, I can imagine that's pretty much what it was like walking on campus, seeing that many people. You probably got a little bit more than that, obviously, because of commuters and stuff, but really small community. So you start to get to know names really well.
Oh, I knew
you
everybody.
See the same people over and over again. So that was probably really exciting for you to like have that kind of like cool, fun little community. Were you running Bible studies or any of that kind of stuff when you first came on campus to do that?
Well, no, because we got on the student leader track pretty quickly.
Okay.
And so students, that were coming to GCU really wanted to be involved in ministry. So the thought was, how do we continue to develop this whole idea of student ministry, man? We need to lean into this.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. So, I would lead a study here and there, or speak here and there, or do a prayer group or something like that. But no, the real ministry to students was done by students. And I'd speak in chaplain. I'd be a bit of a figurehead or a mascot, or however you want to look at it.
Totally.
But I was, a little bit of that face that would roam around campus and try to encourage kids spiritually. And so, I would speak here and there, but really it was about the students, us figuring out how to give students those opportunities to really invest in their fellow students.
Which is super exciting, because when you get to provide opportunities for students that like have the drive to lead, it's like you don't have to like convince them to do it. You just have to like try and guide them on how to do it the right way. Yeah. So I'm sure that was really fun for you. Did you have like a big team behind you when you started doing that, or was it really just you that started off like enabling students?
No, we had two phenomenal spiritual life staff. So when I came here the first year, I was the campus pastor, and we had two staff. One was named Jake. Jake was really interested in global ministry stuff. Mm-hmm. And so global outreach off campus was really kind of his thing. Danielle was the other staff member, so just the three of us were in spiritual life. And Danielle was really committed to Bible study and discipleship, and those kinds of things. And so we had a meeting one day, I remember, in my office. I said, all right, we're going to reorganize spiritual life. They said, okay, what does that mean? I said, well, what do you want to do? And Danielle says, I want to do life leader stuff, discipleship. All right, that's your job. I said, Jake, what do you want to do? I want to do global ministry and all that. I said, all right, that's your job.
Wow.
I said, just like that? And I said, yeah. There's no reason to have you guys here if you're not going to do the things that you love. So those are your jobs. Go figure them out. And they did. And they were great.
That's
Jake's
awesome.
he's on the mission field now, vocational, missionary, doing great work in Thailand. And Danielle's here, doing work.
So now, I mean, you got to see the last 12 years of growth from like 1,500 students to now 20 plus thousand, right? I think 20,000 on campus, right? And then 30 plus something more than that just online.
Oh, it's 80,000 online.
80,000 online.
24,000 ground.
Wow. And then how many commuting do you know?
Well, the ground campus
that's going to
involves residential and commuters.
Okay.
And cohort students.
So how many people live on campus then?
15,000
living
in residence.
you guys 10x that, which is ridiculous to think about. Just over the time, like that's a really big number. So, I mean, you get to witness something. I mean, obviously Grand Canyon is, I think, it's still the fastest growing campus, right? One of the fastest growing campus in the world or in the U.S. So you get to witness firsthand something that very few people get to witness. And that's getting to see, instead of like a business scaling and growing and starting to make, 7-8 figures, doing really well, adds employees, whatever it is, you get to see like a community just like exponentially grow. So what is that like? Like what are some of the things maybe that have stuck out to you, just being able to see like, wow, this went from a community of 1,500 people to now 15,000, and it doesn't look like it's stopping anytime soon.
Well, it's difficult. I mean, scaling a business or scaling a community and doing it in a way in which you don't lose those key components that really make it something that you want to be a part of is really hard. And thankfully, God has brought incredible staff people to us over the years that really see what needs to be focused on in order for the community and culture and experience to be maintained.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it doesn't get harder every year that we add another 2,000 beds on campus to to accommodate the growth. It's still difficult, and the larger we get, the challenges of creating intimate community are still there. So if we keep doing the things that we've always done and make sure that relationship building is at the core of what we do, then I think we can experience the kind of community and culture life that we have here.
Yeah.
But it's all dependent upon great students coming here to invest in small community that builds a big community.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the balance of that is just really, really important.
Totally.
So you need staff that values that and students that will pour into small community, which is a part of the base of building a large community and a large community experience.
Yeah.
It's home to home, so to speak.
So you obviously had mentioned that this is something like, then when you jumped into this, clean slate, college, getting into the real world, finished your senior year. So how long did it take for you to adjust to doing student ministry? Did it click pretty quickly actually for you, or do you feel like it did take time?
It probably took me a couple years. I mean, using the analogy from racing, it took me a couple years of seat time to kind of get this thing figured out. And I had some real gifts. My sons were here, student athletes, that gave me a little entree into that population on campus.
Totally.
And my oldest son in particular, he's crazy. So he was at the front of the line for anything that he was invited to do. So he'd introduce me to all his friends and teammates, and that made it easy. He helped break down the walls for me. Then I had incredible staff that were really great with students, and they brought me in. I mean, they could have kept me at arm's distance,
right?
But the staff who had these great relationships that were half my age invited me into what they had already built. And so I had a lot of really gracious, generous people that really helped me turn the corner. So 2 years doesn't seem like long now that I look back on it. It was probably felt a little bit like it did when I was in the motorsports thing. But, once I fell into it, and part of it is I know I'm old enough to be their dad. And I knew it when I got here.
Right.
So my level of cool was not going to be cool here. It just wasn't. And so because of that, it's like, all right, just deal with it. Yeah. You are not a young 28-year-old cool pastor. You're not. That day has long passed. So I just kind of embraced, being that dad figure. And honestly, the kids have just been so gracious to me. And they still invite me to do fun stuff. I'm looking at some of these pictures on the wall here that, the things I've gotten to do over the years. It's because the students have just been really warm and gracious to me.
Yeah. Which, if anything, has just been affirmation for you that you're in the right place. Just seeing that you've been welcomed into this, which is super awesome.
Yeah.
Are there any standout experiences over the last decade that you kind of think about, or that have really pivoted just your experience with GCU? Any specific student encounters or testimonies or a person on staff that came on, or a certain speaking event? Are there any things that stand out to you as something exceptional in your career here at GCU?
Yeah, the thing that surfaces above everything is when I'll do this quite often throughout a school year. I'll just go grab lunch by myself. I'll go out in front of the student union or somewhere and just sit at a table by myself.
Yeah.
And invariably a student will go, "Hey, okay if I sit with you and have lunch? Sure.
Yeah.
Pull up a chair. And I'll have these incredible conversations. And I'll learn about these students and their life experiences or what got them to GCU or what they've experienced here. And I'll just give you one example of a story that happens every single year, some version of this. It was an international student. He came here because he couldn't get into the engineering school that he wanted. He landed at GCU. And our program wasn't accredited at the time. It was brand new. Yeah. So we were a fledgling engineering program.
Right.
And I sat down, put my Qdoba down in front of me, and he looked at me, and I thought, he's going to ask me if he can come over and sit. So I kind of nodded, and he goes, hey, are you Pastor Tim? I said, yeah. He said, is it okay if I come over and sit with you? I said, sure. Mm-hmm. So he came over. I said, well, tell me your story. How'd you get here? What are you doing? He said, well, I want to tell you my story. He says, I'm from China. I came as an international student to the Americas because I wanted to study engineering. And I didn't get in the school I wanted. I ended up here. And he said, I didn't grow up in a Christian home, didn't come to GCU as a Christian. And he says, but because the students loved me, I heard the gospel for the first time while I was here. Mm. He says, in my sophomore year, he said, I made a decision to follow Jesus. And he said, I started going to a life group. And I loved learning the scripture. He said, so in my junior year, I became a life leader. Mm. And he said, so the next year, my senior year, I'm a head life leader. Mm. He says, I'm now engaged to another life leader. And he says, we're getting married after we graduate. I mean, he came here not a believer, and he leaves here as not only a follower of Jesus, but a leader.
Yeah.
It was an incredible story.
Wow.
And I just thought, if those are the kind of stories we can keep telling here year after year, this is a good place to invest in one's life.
100%. I think it's, I don't know the exact phrase, but I know that they say something along the lines of stories are like the new fuel for marketing and for businesses and storytelling. It's huge. So, that's an awesome story. I like that. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've experienced a lot. You've been here for the last 12 years. What does the future look like for Tim Griffin at GCU? Are you planning on sticking around here for a few more years? Are you trying to move to the next thing? I know you mentioned retirement a little bit earlier on in this, but is GCU, you think, like where you want to finish off the career and then focus in on family and some other things?
Well, my life has been so strange. I have no idea, what God has in store for me.
Yeah, you could just be in the NFL next week.
Hey, somebody looked at my resume, they go, well, that could happen.
Yeah.
That could happen. I don't know. I feel like I've got another good 10 years of working in me.
Yeah.
I still feel young.
Totally. Do you think the students help with that?
Oh, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, you're around youth and vision and ambition all day, every day. Yeah, it's a great environment for keeping that alive. But at the same time, I'm not getting any younger. Every day I get a little bit older.
Right.
And somebody needs to have my job at some point. Mm-hmm. This is a great job, and somebody's going to be blessed to have it. And I want to be sure that when that time comes, I know when it is. I don't want somebody to have to drag me out of here. I want somebody to say, I want to know in my heart of hearts, you know what, it's time to, pass this baton. Not to sound corny or not, but that's exactly, what needs to be a part of this. So I am thinking in terms, all right, how do I start shifting gears? Mm-hmm. Because students will come and go and it'll turn over pretty quickly. They'll forget me, within short amount of time. And that's just the nature of a school where you get a lot of turnover, a lot of students coming and going. So, I think right now my stewardship is to be faithful to what I have to do today, but to also think about setting it up for the next person.
Totally.
And so we're already taking steps to do that, or we're having conversations about some of my responsibilities and how those things can get handed off when the time comes. And then, whenever that time is, whether, the president decides that it's time for me to go, or whether, my wife says, it's probably time for me to go, or somebody just gives me that look like, hey, dude, it's time for you to go. I don't know when it's going to happen. So I just want to have things in place. I want it to be a smooth, seamless transition as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm at that stage in life where I'm thinking that way. Am I planning to be here for another 5 or 10 years? Yeah, absolutely. That's my plan. But I did that at NASCAR and I was gone 5 months. So, who knows? I mean, I'm trusting the Lord for what he has for me.
Totally. And so just one other question I wanted to ask is, for someone in your position that does so many things, like how do you measure growth for yourself at this point? Like, do you set goals? And what kind of goals does Tim Griffin set for himself on like how you can keep growing? Because obviously like we're young, we obviously have all this aspiration and we have things that we're driven towards. But you got a pretty long resume of experience and accomplishments. So for someone of your age, do you feel like you're at the point where you're like, I don't know what to achieve next? Or do you constantly have something that you're striving after?
I still have a pastor's heart. I think I always will. I want to be a shepherd, and shepherding people means that at certain times you're walking in front of them, sometimes walking alongside of them.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of at a stage where that, because I've had a lot of experiences, that I need to figure out how to hand those off.
Yeah.
How to hand off the insights or the lessons learned in a way in which it's helpful. Mm-hmm. So right now, I really love being around young leaders.
Yeah.
Right now, most of them are my staff, and they're phenomenal. Mm-hmm. But I also want to be around students who are really thinking through who they are and who they are becoming and who they want to become. And how and what can I share with them that will be useful?
Yeah.
Because dealing with a professional staff member is one thing. Dealing with a student is a different deal.
Right.
And so, for me, I want to be able to transition that information in a way in which it makes sense for both of those groups.
Right.
And then, the university just has certain expectations of who's going to fill the role of a VP. Mm-hmm. I've got certain things that, Brian, the president, what he expects from me. My peers, they expect me to do my business in a way in which doesn't hinder their jobs, but helps their jobs. And then those below me, I want to serve well also. So, you start, once you get a perspective that this is going up and down, my leadership responsibilities, you got to be on your game. You just can't, if you roll off the throttle, I mean, you're going to wreck your car. So I don't want to do that. I mean, I want to be sure that I'm paying attention to those above me and what they need from me, those that are alongside of me, what they need in my role, and those under me that I can help them to prepare for the next thing God has for them.
Love that. Sweet. All right. Well, I could ask you a million questions and we could do this all day long, but I know you're a busy man and got things going on. So I thank you so much for being on the podcast and taking the time to be on this.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking.
All right. Sweet. Well, with that being said, guys, thanks for tuning in for the podcast. You guys can check out our growing archive of podcasts at Ask Us Why Podcasts. We have 2 different podcasts, The Vessels, and this is the 2 Cents. And we hope that you guys were blessed by this like I was. And with that being said, we'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace out. Hey guys, thank you so much for making it to the end of this podcast episode. If it was somewhat beneficial for you in your walk with Jesus, that means that it could also be for someone else. And so I just want to challenge you real quick to share this podcast with your friends and your family, whether that be via social media, whether it be a text message, or if you're old school, send it by email. Either way, we would love it if you would continue to help us reach more believers, as we are passionate about discipling and growing them so that we together as a community can grow the kingdom. Another great way that you can support us is by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify. Both of those, when you leave reviews, it really helps the algorithm and helps push our content to other people. But either way, we